yes, the haunting sounds of Rockwell this morning. 13 Russian nationals and 3 Russian entities have been charged with meddling in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. These charges include conspiracy, fraud, bank fraud, and aggravated identity theft.
With us this morning to break down the indictment, legal expert David O'Brien from Crowell and Mooring. He was also an assistant Commonwealth attorney in Virginia. And we have a cybersecurity expert, Matt Brown, co-founder and CEO of ShorePoint. Thank you both for being with us today. We appreciate it.
David, we want to start with you. These 13 Russian nationals, are we ever going to see them in a courtroom?
No, I don't think so. You know, there's no way we're going to be able to extradite them from Russia. But, you know, I don't know that that's sort of the entire point here. I think that Mueller was demonstrating that he could penetrate their network. He could develop a great deal of information, an amazing amount of information, really, about them. And, of course, they won't be able to travel here, and they probably won't be able to travel outside of Russia.
But if they can't do anything, and we already have the FBI confirming that they expect this meddling in 2018, excuse me, they can't do anything legally that you're saying we're not going to see them in a courtroom. What can be done as we prepare and anticipate for 2018's election, or is this the new normal?
I don't think it's the new normal, but I think that the indictment reveals how they went about undermining our elections, and I think that it's sort of a roadmap about how we can counter it. And there's no question but that this is a very, very disturbing trend, and something needs to be done about it. They declared information warfare on us, and we need to fight back.
You know, when I worked in New Jersey, I covered a lot of organized crime and RICO cases. And it seems when you read this indictment that this is a step along a way of setting up an entity here, and that there could be other places this go. Do you need to have this piece of the puzzle in place before you maybe move on, if you're Robert Mueller, to connect the dots here, if there are dots to be connected?
I don't know that there's a natural progression here, but I think that this was a way of demonstrating that they're on top of things and that there is more to come. In reading this indictment, let me just say, they built this very, very carefully. It's well laid out, and this is a formidable team, and I would not want them on the other side of me in the courtroom.
David, there have been a handful of, I hate to even reference random tweets, but I have seen a handful of people come out and say, well, the United States has done this to other countries before, and we've meddled before. Is that comparison necessary, relevant? Does it help the conversation at all? Or is that not the point?
I don't think it's relevant. I think what's relevant is the disclosure of what was going on here. A budget of $1 million a month, 80 operatives, having 100,000 followers on the sites that they developed. It was amazing how successful they were.
Let's bring in Matt Brown. Matt, there was a remarkable hearing on the Hill this past week with the heads of all of the major intelligence organizations in agreement that this happened. And then Friday comes along, and then we have indictments. Right. One of the big questions last week during those hearings was, what are we doing to counter this? Are we doing anything to counter this? And even if we are, would we necessarily be spelling it all out in detail in a public hearing?
Yeah, I think it's a great debate, right? You know, a lot of the times that we spend defending the cyberspace from a government perspective is focused on defending data, protecting information systems, making sure that the vulnerabilities that are identified are patched and managed. We don't spend a whole lot of time on kind of managing misinformation, and there's no one responsible for it. We don't have you know, an organization that their job is to kind of validate what is verified information, what's coming from attributable sources, et cetera. And I think that's a real question that we've got to answer ourselves, is exactly how we're going to deal with that going forward.
You know, previously we heard Sheryl Sandberg saying that because Facebook doesn't create news content, they're not a news organization. Obviously, I think these indictments really change the conversation and framework around the role of these social media sites. But what can be done to force them to take on that responsibility and take it on in a way that is really protecting the United States?
Yeah, I think they play a major role. So, the social media and technology companies out there play a major role in being able to attribute information, being able to tag information that could be, you know, not productive in the American discourse. I think right now they're seeing a lot of feedback that's coming to them that is forcing change. I think Facebook came out today and said they're now mailing postcards to validate information. So there's steps that are being made.
What's the disconnect though with these people? Because in one way, a lot of the cybersecurity conversations we've had over the past 20 years or so have all been about binary codes and encrypting data and things like this. This kind of thing though takes some intellect and some suspicion about whether or not what you're seeing is actually true. Is Silicon Valley necessarily the best group of people to be dealing with this if they are so centered on the zeros and the ones?
Yeah, so again, it's a balance, right? It has to be a partnership between the federal government sharing information of what is a problem, what they are seeing, indicators of compromise and threats that are out there, as well as the technology companies listening to that and figuring out what role do they play and how can they affect it. But the challenge you have is anonymity is part of the internet. I mean, it is part of the issue. Your dog has a Facebook account, right? I mean, it's very easy to create an account of social media. It's very difficult to attribute that account to someone and have validity into what that account is and who's speaking. And
sometimes the anonymity, especially for people in our profession, it's not the worst thing. I mean, it's a very interesting balance that we're seeing unfold. Thank you both for being with us today.
Sure.